Hello, Graphite Knights, and in this video we're going to be drawing the Graphknight himself, riding this giant eagle. You can see in his hand he's got some tufts of feathers. So I'm excited to get in this with you, and you can see there's a whole battle scene going on in the background. We're going to talk about the process here. We're going to talk about how we made the scene feel bigger than it was going to on its own. I am going to be using 5-point perspective. I know you guys have seen me do a couple of videos on these. I really do enjoy using 5-point perspective. I think it's a powerful tool, and honestly I'm considering making it more standard, not the only thing that I do, but more standard inside different comic panels. I will say it is time consuming, but just the outcomes are so wonderful. To start, I'm drawing my eagle. Now that is a cooked turkey, chicken, whatever you want to call it, but it is the shape of bird that I'm most familiar with, so I'm just using it to kind of like base sketch where I want this. We are going to end up tilting him even more. We're trying to kind of place him, this giant eagle, so that he sits inside and wraps around the dome that we've created. Everything finds its place somewhere within the sphere and is subject to the sphere. And so the body will morph to that. This is kind of the line of motion I'm using here to sculpt this out. We're going to create a rough eagle to start, and then we'll fine tune him as we go. So many things in art. You look at a piece and you're like, wow, this is a magnificent piece of art. And I would love to someday do a challenge with you guys where like I can't hit the undo button, because I think what we would come to understand is that art is a building process. It is okay to sketch and erase and sketch and erase and improve and improve. And in fact, in writing, I'm a novelist first. I was a fantasy novelist, and now I'm doing graphic novels. But they say writing is rewriting. And if you're not going to rewrite, then you're not a writer. And so, the first part is just putting something down on the page. It can be rough, but you want to start sculpting that out. You want to start crafting that out. One thing I do love about Procreate is that it gives me the ability to kind of infinitely erase. If you're on paper, you can still erase. You can still absolutely erase. Just draw light lines. If you notice that you've gone too heavy-handed, take what they call light boxes. Five Below is actually selling these. I don't know if they still are, but like it's Five Below. It's like a $5 light box. And you can just set your paper on it, put a new piece of paper over top, and trace out the lines you want, leave the lines you don't want out of it. I actually like some sketchy lines. I know people don't want, the feathered look where you've kind of gone over the same spot a series of times to find the right line. I know that's not considered desirable. Sometimes I think it's desirable. It just depends on the emotion you're trying to create, the style that you're going after. And we'll talk about style here for just a second, since we landed on it. I have a style. It is definitely not a style that most people would recommend. Pencil lines are like frowned upon in, I think, the art community a lot, unless someone is just a sketcher, right? Like if someone does sketches, then it's like, oh no, it's good, it's okay. They shade with their pencil and all of those kinds of things. I'm someone who grew up using pencils to draw. I would do it during science class, in math class, and basically any class, at least in between notes. English class tend to hold my attention better. I liked the story elements. I liked the communication elements. But, these are the things I grew up drawing with. And so I remember taking art classes in high school and feeling so scandalous. Like that was not on my approved list of classes. My parents would not be pleased if they knew, kind of thing. And it was like a very freeing thing. And actually I took a creative writing course where I really fell in love with like narrative writing. I was like, wow, like actually this is legitimate. And sometimes we just need people to tell us that in our lives, right? Like, no, like this is a legitimate thing to do and enjoy and be a part of. But anyways, if you like drawing with pencil like I do, that's great. There's a lot of people in the community who will say like, oh, you should get rid of your pencil marks. And that is definitely a style. I like creating like a very, like, I think of comic books that I read growing up, and now they weren't done with pencil, but they had clear lines at point. Different comics will have different degrees of like realism that they're going for. There are different artists who work on them, but I would encourage you to pick up a comic or pick up like I think maybe Pokemon's a good example. There's a Pokemon comic. You're gonna see those outlines, or like our old cartoon shows. If you think of the old Pokemon animations, you think of like Transformers. Those lines are there, my guy, and I like that. Those are fun for the story, and so I've found a way to incorporate those lines. Style, again, I'm going to use the writing as the analogy here. C.S. Lewis says, and I'm paraphrasing him a little bit, but I think I'm pretty spot on. This is from memory. that style is knowing what you want to say and saying exactly that. And he's talking about writing. I think that's absolutely true. I think it's true in our visual storytelling as well. It's knowing what you want to convey and conveying exactly that. And for me, I'm creating these fantasy pictures. I want them to feel fantasy, and if there's an action in them, so for this, we're going to have this eagle flying across the screen. I want him to feel large and powerful and mighty. I want them to feel, as we look at the picture, that they're going fast. How do we convey those things, right? We're not going to see the eagle doing something mighty, and there's not going to be little animation of the eagle moving. So how do we convey fast and mighty? How do we convey cold? I want this to read as a picture like this is a cold, dark cavern that these things are inside of. So we found ourselves, that's our setting, BT dubs, inside the graphic novel that I'm working on. We found ourselves inside this huge cavern where these monsters called skirops are attacking the Graphknight, and we have giant eagles on the side of the protagonist to help us out. So how do we get those things to read? How do we stylistically say what we want to say, right? The first step, I think, is to know what you want to say. And that might be different. You might want to say something a little differently than me. What I want to say in my stories, okay, we'll start with macro context. This is a story about a knight that lives inside a world called Jar-nel 1. That it's spelled differently, but it's a play on words. It's journal. This is a knight that lives inside a journal, and his name is the Graphknight. That's a play off of graphite. I want this whole world to feel like it's penciled inside a journal. And so for me, I'm not hiding those lines. I'm embracing them. I'm making them part of the story's identity and really just like loving on them. And I do love them. And so that's part of what I want to say. I want to say that in this story, like, hey, this exists inside a fantasy world, but this fantasy world is almost like an enchanted journal. When you pick up this graphic novel, these things have come to life. I also think there's freedom in that. It gives it a little bit of a cartoon bend, and I can play with things that way. Next, we're saying size. How do I say size? I think that's part of why the 5-point is powerful, is because it allows us to kind of bulge things out in our center perspective. And so if you have an item that you really want to stand out, or a person that you want to stand out, whatever that thing is, you can do that in a really wonderful way. I've darkened my screen here just for a minute. I'm blocking out my base colors. The light will come back, I promise. I'm sorry you guys can't see it too well. It'll just be a second. We're going to put some whites down, some browns down. For me, I can see my lines better than you can. My screen is reading more as a gray with my black lines there. But again, it'll just be a second, and it'll just be for our eagle. I won't be doing this to you guys again. But for me, I'm going to use the eagle in the center so that I can make him really large. And there's going to be another beautiful thing about the 5-point here that we're going to use to kind of convey danger and scope of how scary this kind of world is. Whatever we put as our background, we can carve it away from the eagle as we go left and right, and we can show that there's a cavern below him. And if the Graphknight were to fall, or if the eagle were to get struck, it would mean death. It would mean danger. And so we have that opportunity to show that as well. How do we show speed? Well, people use movement lines in animation. I think it's absolutely acceptable to use movement lines in graphic novels as well. You'll see certain graphic novelists will take, I'm thinking of like The Flash. He has a streak going behind him. Or like some of my old X-Men comics, or if you will, like let's see, Spider-Man, or like sword swings in the Bone books. What they'll have sometimes, instead of just like a blur line or a streak, is they'll have less or more opaque, more how do I say that? They're less visible versions of the character behind, and you can kind of follow them into completely disappearing and see their motion lines that way. Those are all valid ways to tell the story. You just have to pick the one that you think is going to speak most clearly what you want to say, and you have to know what you want to say, and you want to say exactly that. And so for me, I think if I added like a skew of like 5 of the same eagle behind him, kind of following that curve, it would actually read more slow than fast. And that's not what I want to say. I want to say fast. And so I'm going to go for more of like the streaks, more of like a wind streak even, not like a color blur streak. And then we're going to also put, because we want to go fast and cold, there's going to be some cool lines wisping off him like wind. We'll twirl those, and it'll give that perception, I think, of wind just kind of casting off and over and around our eagle as he's flying. And it'll make it sense, right, for why our Graphknight is pulling on his feathers. Hopefully, if you have a friend, maybe one of you out there has an eagle as a friend, but hopefully you're not just pulling on its feathers for fun. And if you have a friend that's not an eagle, but like a person, hopefully you're not just pulling on their like hair for fun. Like this, it should read something. It should be part of the story, the dynamic setup of characters, the way they're sitting and standing and bending. All of those things should be part of our story. And so I think that's true even with the details we choose to fill out. For me, I want this eagle to feel powerful and majestic, and so we're going to take some time to detail him. I want him to be the focus of this panel, right, with the Graphknight sitting on side of him. But even then, we're going to make that Graphknight take less of our focus for this one. He'll be there, but the reason why is because, again, we're going for magnificence when it comes to our eagle in relationship to our drawing. I have kind of reshaped his head. I want to talk about that for just a second. Look at the shape of this eagle left to right. You'll notice that his tail bends back and his head, as you go forward, bends back to on the right side. That is honoring that curve. It can be a lot harder to do that with organic shapes than it is with like boxes. With boxes, you're like, okay, cool, just follow these lines. You're still doing that, but the head has its own contours. And you have to kind of decide for yourself. This isn't an exact science, and I'll, or if it is, I don't know the exact science. I'll say that. But you have to kind of choose and estimate out how you're going to honor the contours of the anatomy alongside the contours of the perspective. And that takes some work to do, and you kind of have to be stylistic in that as well. And so for me, like, I wanted to show this eagle as like having like a flatter head top, and so I honored that and said I can give some bend in the beak and in the under part. And so we kind of play with those things together to get them to read well. For the back wings, for his tail feathers, I think there could still be a little bit, more of like a downward bend, and so we're going to push those down more. We want it to read as aerodynamic as it pushes into that left side of the circle. And so we have our eagle flying by. We have our Graphknight on top. We're going to start working on that background. We're choosing a color. I want a color that fits with the rest of the panels I've already made. So I'm kind of bound by that. We don't want to start making us, the reader feel like, oh, we're in a different location. And so, this is the color that the background has in it. This is what we're using to make to make wind. This is really fun. I'm going to take my pencil and kind of sketch those out, and then I have a liquify tool which will allow me to kind of push and pull on those. You're wholeheartedly welcome to. Recommend you use that in Procreate if you have that. If you don't, then just like be more intentional. If you're drawing on paper, you're going to have to just take the extra time to kind of curve and bend your lines on your own. You want these lines to read like they're pushing back, but also like they got hit, right? And so there's a little bit of a balance to play with there. I'm making this background here. As I make that background, you can see I pushed it. I kept it within that 5 point. I want it to read so that even though this eagle is majestic and large and grand, the cavern below then must be huge, because at no point is he flying overhead of ground. He can drop into the darkness or he can fly, but those are his choices. And I want you to feel the weight of that. In our previous panel, the Graphknight was falling. He landed on top of the eagle. The eagle swooped up and saved him. And so we have that rescue, but we still want us to feel that peril. I think there's a couple more things we can do to kind of get the scale, not only of the eagle, but then using the eagle of the size of this cave. And to do that, I'm putting a couple of artifacts in the background. So you'll see I put that pillar in the top right. I'm crafting out a little pillar dangly chain thing in the top left of these land pieces. We have an ancient kingdom that was like abandoned, and so it's okay to have like not fully constructed things, like abandoned, torn down things a little bit. So I don't feel the need here in this cave to have like a plethora of buildings and like a city in the background. I don't think it's necessary. I don't think it's actually even that big. Although it's big, this this eagle is not city sized, but he's huge. And then we can play with the foreground. You're welcome to see for yourself if you're drawing along with me what you want to do, and in your own drawings, right? I think this communicates like the cavern's a little too small, and so I'm going to push that back, kind of get that out of the way. It was good to try. I don't regret trying it, and like I said, drawing is redrawing, writing is rewriting. I do a lot of both of those things, and that's a good time. I'm going to create some skier ups in the background. These are the monsters that are attacking our Graphknight as he is exploring this area. And so he's got allies to help him, but I want to show that, like, hey, there's conflict going on even bigger than what the Graphknight has faced. There's a whole battle ensuing in the background. So we've seen that in other panels, but I want this panel to read that way as well. To do that, I made a couple, of ski rops in the background. I made my eagle. I'm going to darken him up and make him more shadowy as well, because they're not the focus. I don't want them to steal the show. I want them to be a part of the show. And so we'll end up blacking them out entirely, but they'll be there. Guys, thank you so much for sitting through this drawing session with me. I love talking about style, love talking about how we can make our worlds feel bigger, and I'm so grateful for you. Make sure to like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. Thanks.